Okay, this is the presentation of the short presentation of the project Children Hybrid Integration in the Education System, or Child Up, which is a project, a European Horizon 2020 project. The Child Up means Children Hybrid Integration Learning Dialogue as a way of upgrading policies of participation. This is the consortium, so you can see that the project is coordinated by the Department of Studies on Language and Culture at the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, and I am the coordinator. And then we have several research partners in Belgium, Finland, Germany, Poland, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, and three other partners which are working on dissemination, communication, and impact. And they are the International Institute of Humanitarian Law in Italy, the FREREF in France, and the European School Ed Association in the Netherlands. Child Up has two general aims. The first one is regards research. So the first aim of Child Up is investigating the possibilities and opportunities of children with migrant background to participate in changing their social and cultural conditions of hybrid integration. I will explain in a few minutes what hybrid integration means. So we use the concept of children with migration background, since there are very different situations and conditions in the seven countries about the meaning of migration. So there are several children who were born in the host countries, so they have a migration background. They are not, in a strict sense, migrant children. So we used this concept to introduce any situation in which there is, in which migration counts in children's life. The second aim is about the improvement of the practices of hybrid integration. So we propose methods and tools to support and improve these practices, in particular dialogue and promotion of agency of children with migration background. We'll see in a few seconds what agency means. Agency is a core concept in this project. So since we analyze the ways in which migrant children's agency is enhanced, so what is agency? Agency is active participation, which is related to choices of action and to change of social and personal conditions. So what we planned when we started with the project and we presented the project, it was to understand the promotion of this agency, the ways of promoting agency. So the ways in which migrant children with migrant background could choose, if there are ways in which they can choose, they can support it in their choices of action and change of social and personal, of their own social and personal conditions. So the problem is what social structures can enhance and support agency. So this is a basic point, a basic problem in our project. In the education system, agency is important. We know from the literature and also from the experience that teacher-student relations are a very important factor in the education experience of children in general and migrant children in particular. So the educational structures, which are identified in the ways of conveying the knowledge and evaluating children's actions, require children's participation, but do not enhance and support children's agency, since there are not choices in conveying in the way in which children can participate in this conveyance of knowledge and in the way they are evaluated. An important concept against this background is facilitation, which is a dialogic form of communication, which has the function of encouraging, enhancing, and supporting children's agency. And such a dialogic form of communication enhances, first of all, equity of participation, which concerns both the participating children and the participating facilitator. Second, this form of the facilitation empowers as the function of empowering participants' actions. And finally, it shows sensitivity for participant actions. So agency is linked to hybrid identity. The point is that migrant children's agency can allow the construction of new meanings of cultural identity, and it can enhance also the social negotiation of cultural identity as a fluid, malleable, contingently constructed in communication. This means that cultural identity becomes through communication system, through communication, for instance, in the classroom, a hybrid identity. So facilitation can enhance children's agency and hybrid identity, thus avoiding the construction of unchangeable traditions and motives of separation among children. And in the interaction, in the classroom interaction, in the interaction between children and adults, for instance, teachers. So against this background, migrant children's integration can be seen as hybrid integration. And the concept of hybrid integration means that there is mixing of facilitation and agency in producing the narratives of children's personal trajectories in classroom communication. And secondly, the hybrid integration means that there is a variety of situations of personal cultural trajectories which can be narrated in this communication. So hybrid integration means the mixing of facilitation and agency on the one hand, and the variety of situations of personal cultural trajectories that are narrated and so confronted and compared and produced in this communication in a hybrid way. This concept of hybrid integration changes also the meaning of multicultural classrooms. A classroom can be the setting for producing narratives about different personal cultural trajectories. So multicultural means that there is this production of narratives. It doesn't mean that there is a sum of individuals with different predefined cultural identities. So this is the meaning of multicultural classroom, which is based on the idea that there is an interaction, an ongoing interaction in the classroom in which these narratives are produced, these different narratives are produced. So this multiplicity of narratives of personal cultural trajectories show hybrid integration within the classroom. Against this theoretical background in which agency, facilitation of agency, hybrid integration are the core concepts, we conducted a field research with mixed methods. So we administered the questionnaires with a survey to children, parents, and professionals, including teachers, social workers, interpreters, and mediators. Then we administered individual and focus group interviews with children and the professionals. We recorded activities in school, involving children, of course, and teachers, external facilitators, and also mediators. And we administered pre-test and post-test questionnaires about these activities in school, pre-test questionnaires to understand expectations, children's expectations, and post-test questionnaires to allow children's evaluation of the activities, of the recorded activities. This is just a very short overview about the survey. As you can see, we distributed more than 7,000 questionnaires, and in particular, about 4,000 questionnaires were distributed to children aged, including the age of from 5 to 17. And then parents and guardians, teachers, educators, social workers, and mediators, interpreters. So this is the distribution of children with migrant background. As I said, it was this concept included several different situations. You can see that in Sweden, for instance, we have in the Swedish schools in which we made the survey, 77% of children were with migrant background, while on the opposite, we see that in Finland, they were 21%. So there is a large variability. In the total percentage of children with migrant background is 36.7 in the consortium. And these are the individual and focus group interviews that we were able to do. So as you can see, also in this case, we have 403 focus groups interviews and individual interviews. And there is a distribution, also in this case, a very different distribution. We have 161 focus group interviews with teachers, educators, 158 with children. So it's a huge amount of qualitative materials were elaborated in the project. And finally, we can see here the recording of activities and also post-test. So complex, as you can see, we recorded 207 activities in the classroom and 28 activities of mediation. We distributed more than 3,000 tests, including pre and post-test. So more or less 1,600 pre-tests and 1,600 post-tests. So let's give a look to some of the results. One important area is language. Since language is very important because language is the premise for communicating and for understanding each other. So we could see that during the teaching activity, in general, these are not these are aggregated data without distinguishing between different countries. But you can see that the national language is used in more than 70% of the cases, while native languages are used only in 12% of the cases, and many languages are used in less than 10%. Translation is important, as you can see, more than half of the students, of the children responded that translation was used. You can also see that there was a strong support, rather strong support from the point of view of teachers in this case, a strong support of resources for L2 learning, so this almost 70%, while language and cultural mediation and resources for learning native languages are much less used, about 1/3. And finally, if we can compare the point of view of teachers about translation and the point of view of children about the use of translation, which is very similar. But surprisingly, children also noted a support and help in their native language more than half, while teachers didn't recognize equally this support. So in general, in any case, from the survey, it is easy to see that, well, availability of linguistic support varies across the context, of course, but as you can see, school initiatives concern L2 learning much more than language intercultural mediation and supported the use of native language. And in particular, there is a lack of consideration in general for the linguistic abilities and support needs of migrant children. There is a monolingual approach in schools, and so this means that this monolingual approach, of course, hinders migrant children's agency as they cannot participate effectively. There are also some data from interviews and recording. In interviews, we can see that it merges the importance of teaching the language of the receiving country, but in the meanwhile, it is also recognized that the mother tongue is a primary factor supporting school achievements and peer relations among children from the same country of origin. So the lack of interest or the lack of effort about the learning of native language or mother tongue is an important problem. From the recording of activities, we saw that fluency in the use of language can be a problem, so that several children. But fluency is not the only important factor in second language teaching. So there are other important factors that we see in short. It's also interesting to see that there are different modes of teaching second language. So there is a mode based on materials, a mode based on the improvement of student skills, and there is a mode based on classroom conversation that is called classroom context mode by Steve Walsh, that is an expert in this field. So from the recordings of the activities, we could show that the classroom context mode is the mode that encourages the production of children expanded narratives, that means agency, and narratives of personal cultural trajectories. So it's much more effective than the other, that simply using materials or improving student skills. So the second area on which I am giving you some elements of knowledge from the project is agency. So we can see here an interesting table from this survey that is perceived as how migrant children perceived agency and participation. The values are totally agree and rather agree, and we can see that they perceive the importance of teaching activities, so they follow teachers' instructions, they listen to classmates' views and experiences, they collaborate with classmates, they ask when they don't understand instructions, they listen to teacher carefully. All these values are above 80%. Things are not so good when we look at the data about speaking freely about feelings and liking, disliking something that is under 70%, and participating in decision about school activities, and above all saying ideas about classroom design. So in these cases, the percentages are much lower and are also much lower than the percentages of native children. So there are some important problems in participation in when we don't look at the teaching activities or relations of collaboration with classmates. You can also see here a table about teacher support of agency. So teachers perceive their support of agency, well, not in very high percentages, but anyway, in this case, you can see once again that when activities are not strictly connected to teaching, the support of agency is much lower. So what is interesting in particular is that when it comes to enhance children's activities not connected to teaching, only 34, just 1/3 of teachers declare to support agency. So the results of the survey say that most children are positive about their participation in education, but there are some differences for children with migrant background. So they are more positive about hierarchical relationships with teachers than situations in which agency is important. On the other hand, the teachers support agency when it comes to promote children's interests, opinions, and questions. Children's initiatives are less supported when they are not linked to the classroom learning, through learning in the classroom. Agency also was a theme, an important theme in interviews. So, for instance, the professionals, they responded that they promote children's agency in schools, enhancing, on the one hand, enhancing self-esteem, development, plans for the future. On the other hand, it is probably more important, stimulating trust, free expression of feelings and thoughts, and negotiation of rules, shaping social relations according to student needs. But they also recognize limitation of expressions of agency. On the one hand, institutional constraints that are based on the working condition of teachers, funding, language barriers, but also limitations depend on hierarchies and culture of subordination. And also on, according to the teacher, individual and cultural backgrounds, above all for migrant students, and gender differences that are also important for the professional teachers in particular. From the point of view of children, agency is important in taking decisions about themselves, having a sense of influence on school activities, being listened to, being able to form social relationship according to their own needs. So you can see here that there is a mindful conception of agency, which is very similar. These variables are very similar to the concept of agency that we used. So agency's ability to influence also how difficulties are resolved. So there were also answers about agency beyond school, but we are more interested in what is agency in schools. Recordings, when we analyzed the recordings about facilitation in the classroom, we could see different situations. The best one, let's say, to enhance and support agency was a full achievement of facilitation, showing genuine interest in children, supporting children in making explicit, developing or summarizing their points of view, giving minimal feedback to show listening and attention, and so also promoting fluidity of conversations. But there are also situations in which there was more guidance, which was based on adults' expanded turns of talk, and also systematic comments and explanations. There's also normative recommendations. So these conditions limit the effectiveness of facilitation and supporting the children's agency. And finally, there were also some very few cases, but some cases of so-called participated teaching, in which there was a rather traditional teaching, but based also on ways of scaffolding, children answers. And in these cases, we noted the children's alignment with teachers' orientation, but there was also avoidance of negative sanctions from the teacher. So this is the meaning of participative teaching. So promotion of agency decreases from 1 to 4. It is interesting to see what agency meant during these recordings, how we could see agency. We could see agency through expanded narratives of personal cultural trajectories, children's agency, of course, initiatives which were based on minimal enhancement, so children could take the floor and coordinate themselves, and also through the rejection of facilitation comments and requests when children were not happy about them. So these were the most important manifestation of children's agency. We also gave a look to mediation, to culture and linguistic mediation. This is an important aspect because for instance, in these times, we have a large number of children who came from Ukraine with the difficulties that we well know. So in these cases, language intercultural mediation is very important. So we could see mediation also only in Italy for reasons from the impact of the pandemic in the other countries, but it was interesting to see that mediation was not very functional when children are included in these meetings, mediated meetings. So teachers' monologue, there were frequent teachers' monologues and negative evaluations of children and parents. Participating parents gave only very minimal contributions and also defensive comments where they felt attacked by the teachers. So mediators try to mitigate teachers' negative evaluation, support the parents' actions. But the most important problem is that participated in these meetings were rarely involved, gave frequent minimal responses without participating actively. And when they took initiatives, these initiatives were not supported. So children were considered as learners rather than as agents during these meetings about between teachers and parents. And this is a problem that requires some training and some awareness about the importance of involving teachers in mediation. So finally, as I said, we had the post-test questionnaires. The large majority of children of all ages appreciated the activities, and also migrant children considered these activities enjoyable and effective, but there were some more frequent problems of participation, and they felt more frequently assessed. Problems of participation were probably linked to their use of language, limited use of language, and also their difficulty in feeling able to participate. Focus group interviews that we did after post-test questionnaires confirmed the importance of dialogue and support of personal expression as the basic aspects of successful activities. So dialogue was not always successful, of course, not for all children, but activities can be considered as very frequently successful. So to sum up, the survey has shown that agencies promoted but limitedly. There is some problems, insufficient support of children's linguistic resources, and as a consequent, hybrid integration of children with migrant backgrounds seems to be rather difficult in the 7 European countries. Interviews confirmed that agencies promoted, but limitedly, confirmed the support of children linguistic resources is insufficient. But also there is also recognition that agency are hybrid integration, and hybrid integration are important, and several teachers and mediators make an effort in this direction. So about recordings of activities, we have a confirmation that facilitation can enhance and support agency-hybrid integration. We saw different forms of facilitation which have different consequences for children's agency-hybrid integration. And we saw that language and intercultural mediation meets serious problems in enhancing and supporting children's agency and hybrid integration, at least in Italy. Finally, we have some data about the pandemic. We recorded some some points of view from children. So it is clear that children suffered the lockdown in particular. So they were frequently invisible during remote teaching. This was also confirmed by the teachers. So there were important problems with the digital divide, digital illiteracy, insufficient support from teachers and peers. Remote teaching was very tiring, very difficult. There were negative effects on interpersonal relations, negative effects on language skills, learning language skills. And of course, there was a limited possibility to exercise agency in classes. However, it is also important to stress that younger children saw the lockdown as an opportunity for increasing family life, for staying with their families, and older children saw the lockdown as an opportunity to develop their sense of autonomy and responsibility, and also self-control, this agency. The research was very difficult. The pandemic was very important also for the research and for the activities. The collection of data was delayed, strongly delayed. It was impossible to complete the collection of data as foreseen in the original project. But there was a big effort of the consortium partners, and as we have seen, we produced a very large quantity of and quality of collected data during the pandemic. So 103 classes groups were reached, 235 activities were recorded, more than 3,000 questionnaires were collected, and on 83 focus groups were realized. So this was a very big effort. And almost 50% of participants in this activity were migrant children. So we can say that it was, despite the importance of the impact of the pandemic, the research was successful. It's interesting to see that, in particular, the impact of the pandemic on video recordings in different conditions and in different countries. This was an important point, because it is clear that video recordings and a digital platform become very important. So we have different situations, research and facilitation in the class, when and where schools were open. But there was a large use of digital platform. For instance, when children and adolescents were in the class, but it was impossible to have access. So researchers and the facilitators were on a digital platform. In the UK, there was also the necessity to renounce to external facilitators, and unexpectedly, the activities were facilitated by teachers. And there were also situations in which all participants were on a digital platform in different locations when schools were completely closed. So it's interesting lesson learned from this project was the adaptation of facilitation to digital platform. There were several problems, of course. For instance, it was not possible to see nonverbal communication. The children switched off cameras frequently, but the important point is that facilitators were able to enhance adolescent personal expressions through a variety of methods, for instance, including the use of drawings and images. So at the end of the day, the pandemic also, we also learned from the pandemic that it is possible to use digital platforms to facilitate children's agency. And this is important for the future in case of emergency or in case in which it is difficult to reach the children or to get access to the classes. Okay, this is my last remarks. So I thank you very much for listening to me.